let's go ahead and bring up our panelists to the stage and we'll get to know them first. Beautiful. So Jennifer, do you want to share with us your intro? Let's get to know you.
Yeah, definitely. My name is Jennifer O'Neill, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Live Oak Audiovisual. So we are an AV company in Seattle. And so life stopped for us last March because our entire industry collapsed. So prior to March, we were a company of about 10 people. In April last year, we were a company of 2 people, and now we're working our way back up to 10 people. So it's been quite the ride. We typically did only live events, but last May we transitioned to virtuals, and in the past 12 months we've done over 80 virtual events, and we're starting to do some hybrid events as well. And so you asked for a fun personal fact.
Yes.
I am a volunteer responder for the Washington State Animal Resource Team, and what we do is technical animal rescue. So if your dog falls off a cliff hiking or your horse gets stuck in the mud, we bring in the gear and the people and we do technical rescue.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. Scott, we'll go to you next.
Scott Logan, VP of Marketing at Kronologic. We're about 40 people right now, but growing very fast. Seems like every quarter we're hiring another handful or more folks to keep up with our growth. And what we do is we automate the sending of calendar invites in a tailored and timely way to get time back on the rep's schedule in order to do actual value add conversations instead of lead chasing. So fun fact about me, I'm a state bowling champion from high school. I wish it was something way cooler like baseball or basketball or football, but it ended up being bowling. So
nice. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. And Maria.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Maria Gianotti, and I'm the head of revenue growth, revenue marketing at Unbabel. We are 180 employees, and what we do is we have an AI-powered human-refined translation platform for customer support teams. I'm in San Francisco, and for events, I think we've been doing about 12 since the pandemic, but 5 of those we organized by ourselves. So we have been, because some of the ones we had sponsored were just moved to virtual. So we had some people that were actually organizing those for us, but a lot of different formats, and we started exploring a little bit by ourselves by late last year. Yeah. A fun personal fact. A lot of people can't place my accent. I don't know if you guys want to guess, but it's okay. So I speak Spanish and Norwegian, which is why it's very difficult to place because they're totally different languages. So yeah, that's a little fun fact about me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So I'd like to first start off, just opening up the session with kind of setting the stage. As we know, we're going into our 15th month since the Great Pause. And so let's level set a little bit further in terms of, what events looked like from March up until now. So I think, Maria, I'd love to pick on you for this question. And, if you could just chat a little bit further about the format and the different types of events that you've been able to execute in the virtual space.
So the thing last year, right, we had already signed up for several in-person conferences that all moved to virtual. So it was really, and I think the organizers they didn't know what to do, right? So there was a lot of hesitation on getting information. We just didn't know what was going on. We had internal speakers that had to, know the speaking tracks, it was very messy, it seemed like. So we had signed up for about 7 conferences, and we just really had to readjust expectations, right? So for us, one of our big industries is travel, retail, but also travel. And travel was, as you probably all know, that one of the industries that were most affected by the pandemic, right? So we had signed up for a bunch of conferences to support the travel industry, and it was just a lot of uncertainties. In terms of format, we had keynotes, we had roundtables, panel sessions. So that was very nice. It was very diversified in terms of we were testing different formats. We saw more success with shorter sessions, honestly, last year, about 20 to 25 minutes. We had some keynotes with like our CEO, and honestly, like our panel sessions with other speakers in the company and even our CEO actually performed the best, like where we got more registrants, where we actually got the list, where we could do some lead follow-up, which of course is what you want with events at the end of the day. I think for us, in terms of topics, there was a lot of topics about how companies were restructuring like their operational efforts to handle the pandemic. So that was, I think a lot of discussions evolved around that. And we also like something cool that kind of came out of the pandemic is that we started exploring other event formats, right? So one thing we did virtual experiences. So we wanted to better, engage with our prospects and customers, and we were heavily involved or focused on ABM. So we actually had a paint night for, and we have customers and prospects in the US and Europe. So it's like, you have to think about the time zones. A lot of things, direct mail is not as easy in Europe. I don't know if any of you have that experience, but it can get very messy, even if you have a direct mail vendor. So a lot of learnings, I would say. But we had a paint night for US and Europe. We had a virtual escape room this year that was really fun, and we also did LinkedIn Live events. So we tried different formats, and I think that was kind of the beauty of the pandemic, where we hadn't done any of those things before.
Yeah, I love that. And I know so many marketers were just figuring out, get creative, play around with formats, and figure out what works for your business and for your audience. So Jennifer, how about you from your perspective as an AV company? What did you see? Lots of webinars, I'm sure.
Yeah, lots of new things. So for us, a lot of our clients are hotels and restaurants, and so they were just closed. And so what we really focused on was supporting our nonprofit clients who we've been their partner for the past 10 or 15 years. And now they were in a very bad position, not knowing how to fundraise in a virtual environment. And so a lot of what we did was doing virtual auctions, virtual fundraisers. We built a live stream studio in part of our warehouse, and we hosted the events from there. Sometimes we did it on site. We had some really interesting on site. We actually broadcast an auction from a cat surgery clinic once. And so from the tech side, these virtual events are a good way to show what's behind the curtain. Like for this fundraiser, their donors had never seen the surgery site that they were actually raising money for. So by broadcasting from the cat clinic, we could show them exactly what they were paying for. And so there have been some interesting advantages to that side. We've also done a lot of similar to what Maria was talking about. We partnered with United Way of King County to do some donor cultivation events. We would live stream a chef's demo. We work with some pretty well-known chefs like Ethan Stoll, and they would go to a private Zoom event. And so you could cook your steak along with Ethan Stoll and show him your plate, and he would tell you if you should cook it longer, or you could ask him questions on the kind of salt he uses. And those style of events have been extremely, extremely popular over the past year.
Yeah, love that. Beautiful. So thank you both for that. Just to kind of share a little bit more about current plans. So, right. So, and also for our participants, if you go into the polls, we'd love to hear from you all as well. So when to plan for a return to live events. So I was just sharing in our breakout room, we've got some companies that are saying nothing in 2021, live events in 22. We've got others that have already started to put together golfing and, events that are maybe physically outside an open space. And then we've got a handful of marketers that are starting to experiment with hybrid and, in a restaurant, in a private room. So panelists, I'd love to hear a little bit about what your plans are. What are you discovering, in the moment to prepare for this shift? And have you started, or is it something that's kind of 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line? So Maria, I'll start with you, and we'll go to Scott next.
Sure. Yeah, that's a loaded question, right? We actually are planning our biggest summit, biggest event for the year in October. And that was, the hybrid approach was kind of the one we wanted to do, right? We want some component to be in person, but we also would see the need of having the virtual component as well. We have a lot of our, as mentioned, like our customer prospect base in Europe. So we have that issue where, are they actually going to travel to the US? We were planning to have the conference here, like if it wasn't an in-person component in San Francisco, the Bay Area. So we were not too sure about that, honestly. So we see people kind of wanting to go back, but are they going to travel from Europe? That's exactly that. That's why we just didn't pull the trigger there. We also it was also like a lot of talk about COVID measures, right? Like mask wearing. Like, are you going to do on-site testing? Are you going to require vaccination cards, right? So we just thought it was just too much to handle, especially in October, so soon. We just don't know the travel, the restrictions yet. It's too many uncertainties. So we actually decided to just do it virtual, even though hybrid was really what we were aiming for. We just, it's too risky right now. So I think by next year, maybe, hopefully early next year, that will be a little different. But right now, we didn't want to do it.
Okay, so maybe spring 22 for your group?
I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. And Scott, let's hear from you.
Yeah, so the switch to virtual has been pretty good for us, just considering I was saying in the breakout room, we've been able to do much more volume with much less. Like I used to have teams of like 10 people that run demand gen, and like 3 of them were events folks because we were always on the road and out doing logistics. And now, 1 person can manage the entire workload for the most part. And it's been really good because you have different events like wine events and the cooking stuff that you're having. I think that there's more of a variety, and we're finding that people are more engaged because there are so many options. You can pick just what you want, and we're finding that those smaller group events are really good, are more beneficial, I should say, for the guests and for us. We do have a few events that we're sponsoring and going to in the fall, so that'll be interesting, having like field only non-hybrid events. We're also sponsoring a hybrid event in the fall as well. So trying to gauge the waters on how those go, because we're thinking virtual for us for the rest of the year. And then next year, it's absolutely in the plans to start to do some smaller field events to see what people's feelings are. But we're just worried about, maybe the person's willing to go, but the company won't let them, and it could be a mess. So we're going to participate in a few, see if we can learn as much as we can and go from there.
Yeah, one little tip that actually came from the previous event and panel. One of the panelists had shared that they were implementing for those in-person events, they were implementing kind of like a little wristband with a color coding system. So red meant, hey, let's just wave and not touch each other. Yellow was, maybe comfortable with shaking hands, and then green was full hugs. So, and I thought that was quite genius, because these are, just some elements that we now need to think about, in addition to maybe the vaccination cards, the temperature checks, the hand sanitizers, whatever other kind of on-site measures, folks need to now think about. So any thoughts there in terms of other things that maybe some of these programs, Scott, that you're sponsoring, if they're sharing what they're going to be doing on site, that might be a little different?
Yeah, that wristband thing sounds like a Seinfeld episode, but
yeah,
could also be very useful even post or pre-pandemic, honestly. Yeah, they are providing more on-demand recorded sessions for the virtual experience, and then the in-person experiences rooms are going to be a little bit different. The conferences are quite large, so I think it's a huge expense to do both, is what we're seeing. The most I've heard is masks. I don't think that they have said anything that I've read from our notifications yet, because they're out in November timeframe. They're kind of playing it by ear. So I'm still waiting to see how strict everything is going to be. But so far, no restrictions. Now the organizations and conferences we're going to are sales-based, and I think maybe the sales mentality around it, when you have all of them as the buyers and the sellers, is going to be more loose than other organizations, like if it was a healthcare conference or something. But that's what we're seeing as far as the split. It may be just completely different type of a conference for the two audiences.
Yeah, very much so. And I'm just reading a comment here from Manya. So one of the events that they're attending, which is the largest healthcare conference, HIMSS, is requiring proof of vaccinations to attend the conference. So more info to come on how that's going to be logistically, right, rolled out. Any insight from you, Maria? Any thoughts there in terms of hybrid?
It's the same thing, right? When we were thinking about this hybrid event, part of it being in person, we did talk to an event vendor, really, that was like, yeah, like a lot of companies are wondering what to do. Like, is it mask wearing? On-site testing, right? Vaccination cards. So, but there's a lot of question, and I don't think anything has been really decided. So that's why we're like, oh, there's too many things to handle, like logistically, that it just, and also like as Scott mentioned, it's just way more expensive, right? Because you have to think about the virtual, like the live video component, right? Of also recording your conference. Just it's too many uncertainties and too much money, too much cost that's associated with both.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jennifer, just from your perspective, just since we're talking hybrid here, what are you seeing in terms of from the technical perspective? How many cameras on site do you have, streaming connections? You've got the virtual group, the live group. How do you connect them both?
Yeah, a lot of it depends on the platform that you're using. And we're kind of seeing this hybrid as an opportunity to let your constituency choose their own adventure. Like, how do they want to participate? And I think a lot of our clients too are really coming to the realization of how many people were excluded from only in-person events. And so the virtual component provides some equality around that for anybody who may have any kind of access issues. As far as the cameras, and one of the things that we encourage is, if you're going to do a hybrid event, don't exclude your virtual audience. So do things to include them. If you're going to have a virtual audience, don't make it a secondhand experience. So in terms of the tech, write into your script for your host to acknowledge the virtual audience, to talk to them, to read some of the chat. Maybe have a screen in the room that is projecting the chat from the virtual audience, so people in the room can see it, or they can all chat together on the same platform. Having, if there's some sort of contest, pit the virtual audience against the in-room audience for trivia or these kinds of games, but being really conscious about leveraging the tech to make the virtual audience feel equal. And so when you're thinking about your cameras, okay, we want two on the stage, put a third one to the audience, so that when the host is talking to the audience, your tech team can cut to that, or do a side-by-side shot where you have the host and the audience, so that people attending virtually can see all of that. It's important to remember that the people in the room are experiencing the event in 3D, but the people virtually are only experiencing the room in 2D. So think about the tech to add the third dimension for the virtual audience.
I did see a great event this year that was ran by a company that does executive events, and they actually flew in the speakers to speak on stage. This was like midsummer last year. And then virtually you were watching a 3D experience, and then a few of the speakers couldn't travel, and so they were virtual. But when you're watching it and you see like half of them in person, and some of the presentations are just the video screen like this, it was actually much more engaging seeing someone walk around a stage, even though I'm watching it on a screen. I thought that was creative.
Yeah, and there's things too you can do, like with your microphones. Remember that the virtual audience is only going to hear what's fed into the mic. So where do you have your microphones? If you don't have them all around the room, making sure your host repeats the question if there's Q&A, because the virtual audience won't hear the same things that the in-person audience will do. So think about making that equal, or putting in strategies so that the virtual audience hears the whole piece.
Yeah, no, I was just going to share. So we ourselves, right? So us as an event marketing agency, we have about 150 plus virtual events since the pandemic, all very much in this format that you are all experiencing. And now we are starting to plan a hybrid event. So, for us, we're thinking about the live in-person group that would be at that restaurant. And then you've got the virtual group with people joining from basically every other, location outside of, whatever the city is. And to your point, Jennifer, so we're envisioning having a host and a moderator, both for the virtual group as well as for the on-site group. And there needs to be that connection, right, between the hosts in order for those questions to be shared, and also for the virtual audience to chime in and speak up and ask questions that can then be directed to the panel. But what you just mentioned, Scott, we actually, we're thinking, how could we even build a panel where maybe there's two virtual panelists and 2 in person, or maybe we just try to aim for everybody in person. And then there's always pros and cons to both of those situations, but just wanted to share that as well, because that's something that we're going through ourselves. Awesome. So let me just see here. Let me ask just the hybrid, right? So virtual events and participants, if you look in the polls, we do have a question here as well. So do you plan to continue running virtual events in 2022 and beyond? In our eyes, we see that there might be kind of a seesaw, behavior where people have had to go to virtual, and then maybe they're going to swing over to the live and or hybrid, and then maybe it'll swing back into a kind of a combo and keeping the virtual. So I guess, Maria, Scott, do you envision keeping virtual, as a strategy moving forward, even when everyone's vaccinated and able to meet together? And
yeah, I mean, I would say, Scott also mentioned this, the scale, right? The scale of virtual events is so much greater with less resources that it's kind of like difficult to give that up, right? We have been doing virtual. I think most of us have been doing webinars. We've been doing other type of virtual events. I think there wasn't such an emphasis on making some engaging, I think, as today. And so that's more the pressure there. But for us, from my company, we'll still be doing them. We just have to find new ways of doing them. Doesn't get stale, right? So, but for sure, I think scale is important, and I think that's an important part of doing more with less, right? So.
Yeah, I think we're absolutely going to keep doing them. I think that is a fantastic way to not have to require someone to travel, even if it's downtown. A lot of times you're like, well, I'm going to Chicago. Well, am I actually going to Chicago or Oak Brook? Because no one's driving downtown. Same thing with San Francisco and so on. So I think that it's fantastic. I think it has been harder to do the more interactive virtual events because it's been harder to facilitate it. But now that the event companies and everyone from direct mail companies to even the companies that would normally travel or you would travel to them have found a virtual version that is now purchasable as a event in a box, is easier to manage. So I could basically call up a wine place and say, here's the event list, and they mail out the wine, and then it just becomes way easier to facilitate it. They may even have on the other end a project manager that will help you, so you don't even have to use your own project management, and you can get way more creative too. So for instance, we've even done a golf lesson virtually at a trade show, which has done pretty well. So I think that the pandemic has actually enabled marketers to find more ways to interact with more people, and I can't see that stopping. It's just too accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just saw the results. So for those in the audience, we asked, do you plan to continue running virtual events in 22 and beyond? And everyone answered absolutely. So it's interesting, right? Because at the beginning of the pandemic, everybody was, the fatigue and the engagement and, but there's so many pros, right? To the convenience and just hitting, geographically, you don't have that limitation of, 35, 40 mile radius from whatever the venue is, right? A live event. Now you can widen that net. So it's interesting. I think this is definitely here to stay. And then I just wanted to share, so for the audience in fall 2021, what format will you be using for the majority of your events? And 35% said virtual, followed by 41% said a combination. So maybe virtual and or hybrid, or virtual and or in person. So I think most marketers are all kind of in that same boat. So let me just shift back to the hybrid situation. So what do you guys see as the main driver for virtual attendance for hybrid? If you're invited to, you live in New York, you're invited to the event in New York, but maybe you decide to join virtually.
Probably just your own, ability to be comfortable traveling to an event, and or your company saying, sorry, it's not worth the liability. I think that both of those are a situation where you're going to have to either do a hybrid or just split it out and have two different events. Now, like a year from now, it might be totally different, but we'll see.
Any thoughts there, Maria?
No, same as Scott. I think the traveling part was really challenging, right? So yeah, especially overseas. I mean, it's so uncertain there right now. So traveling number one for sure.
Yeah.
As a person who does events all the time, Stephanie, maybe I'll ask you: do you plan on doing hybrid events, like say when this is behind us? Is that an option, or are you maybe going to do more virtual and less in person? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that. That's something we're going to figure out. I think we're going to go through a round of, a handful of hybrid events and really see what that reach is like, right? Because precisely now it's not just the 15 people that are physically in the room with you in that restaurant, but you now have this group of 30, 50 folks, joining virtually. And so I think the ROI potential significantly increases with hybrid, but we know that it's far more layered, complex, so many more details, and especially on the technical side. So TBD on that. Jennifer, sorry, I wanted to let you chime in as well before.
Yeah, for hybrid, definitely taking advantage of this whole evolutionary jump that we've made in technology over the past 12 months. So from your attendee in a technology standpoint, it really levels the playing field in terms of accessibility. Things like closed captioning and translation apps are more easily deployed. So we've done a couple of fundraisers for organizations who serve deaf and hard of hearing individuals. And so we can have side-by-side interpreters or live captioning, and that's at a lower cost to the organization than someone is taking care of a parent, someone's kid is sick and they can't, they have to stay, they can't go to daycare. So there's a lot of tech that can really work on the accessibility standpoint. I think from the event planner side, one, if you're doing a hybrid, you probably have a smaller group in person, so you can actually shop it around to more venues. You might find better pricing. You're paying for less meals in the room. You're paying for less swag. You're paying for less travel. Your AV costs are going to be higher. They should be offset by what you're not spending, or because you're able to get a smaller venue. And then also for the event planner is the reach is longer, and you're also, if you have it recorded, you're creating evergreen content that you can leverage in different ways down the road. We're seeing with nonprofits, they're sharing their fundraiser after the event happens for people who couldn't tune in, and they're raising money, tens of thousands of dollars, 7 to 10 days out after the fundraiser is over, which doesn't happen in a live fundraiser. And the same can be adopted for marketing conferences and customer acquisition. So you can really leverage that evergreen content in a different way than you can in a live event.
That's awesome. Yeah, that even the interpretation, for those that are deaf or hard of hearing that need that, those are additional layers that you previously didn't have to think about because everything was there live in person, and even to the swag and the little details and the desserts and the fun takeaways. I mean, you don't want your virtual audience watching a great party happening in front of you, that you can't participate in. So there's definitely things to think about here. Yeah, I was just keeping my eye on the chat as well. So audience folks, if you do have comments or questions, keep them coming, and we're definitely, able to take that and potentially even bring you on stage if you feel comfortable. So yeah, I just want to move into this ROI kind of category. So as I mentioned, we know that it's more budget, it's more complex, but how can we maximize the hybrid ROI of increased reach?
So one thing that I've really liked about the virtual component of it is that they're a fraction of the cost. And a lot of times the audiences are much bigger, and you can get more traction within your target lists. Like Maria was saying, taking a more ABM focused approach to everything. And if you do that, and you do that right with the small groups and the medium-sized groups, I think that that's good. I also think that when you put on a big conference and you have like 30 speakers, before that was 6 months in the works. Now you can put that together in 2 months. and have all the speakers you want and have enough time for promotion. I mean, maybe 2 months is a little tight, but it doesn't take your whole team for 6 months. So that part of the ROI is why I think some of even the bigger virtual events are going to stay. And for the in-person, I know that for me, when I do in-person again, or at least at high volume, it's going to be more so like a customer ABM list focused dinner. Like even when we're going to a trade show here in November, I'm not doing my normal, how many boxes can I check on the sponsorship? I'll get the budget for it. Now it's like floor presence, get the list, and then how many small 10-person dinners can I have? I mean, that was always part of the strategy, but it was not the strategy. So I think that my mentality around ROI, and I think for a lot of people, is going to be different given those two scenarios.
I mean, I was going to say it's exactly what Scott said. It's just having the one-to-one component, just more intimate event. I think that's really where we're starting seeing more of the value now, because we can do all these virtual events and bring the world together in a way, right? I mean, before we always struggle with the time zones and like doing events if we sponsor conferences in the US, we have to sponsor one in Europe, and now we can actually do that for everyone. You know, it's kind of the beauty of that, bringing the world closer together. But for us, it's as well, it's the same strategy. I think we'll focus less on sponsor the bigger conferences, and focus more on the one-to-one dinners, like smaller ABM focus events. Because that's really where we see the most value. We've always seen the most value there. It's just, I think just because the company, I think sales always wants, to get in front of most people. At the end of the day, the follow-up process that's never really works well. So I think if we be more focused in our approach, we'll be more successful overall. So.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of clients really taking advantage of the evergreen content. And so whether it's a marketing presentation or a fundraiser, and including that into your scripting. So say it's a fundraiser, that platform is going to be closed in 3 days, is include that, hey, after Tuesday, you can still donate to us at this address. And so even with your marketing content, how can they access that? A lot of our clients on the next business day are emailing out that link to anybody who didn't come. And so they can leverage that longer than you can. If you were doing that in a live event, you would have to bring in the videography team, and they would record it, and then they would edit it, and then there's that cost as well. So having a lot of these record features in these platforms gives you another tool to reach out to potential clients or potential employees or donors. And we're seeing a lot of organizations get a lot of roadware out of that. Yeah, and from the AV side, it's one cost. So you add the hybrid, and now you have this product. You add the hybrid component on the AV side, and now you can add as many virtual attendees as you want, and you can leverage that evergreen content as often as you want to.
Beautiful. So Jennifer, just to ask you more of the technical kind of platforms, is it on Zoom? Is it on a platform like this, Welcome or Goldcast, or what are you seeing, at least with your kind of tech clients?
Mm-hmm. It's a combination of things for like nonprofit auctions and fundraisers, virtual graduations. The best and easiest platform is really YouTube. And that's because depending on your constituency, it's easy to join. It's easy to watch. If you have grandparents watching, it's not as complicated. And so this is where I was talking about, make sure that host can see the chat on that platform, bringing that back into the room, bringing it back to the host. We've done several events where we're streaming to Zoom private events or to a Teams show, and that also works as well. That's definitely something to let your AV crew know ahead of time, because we have to run the sound a little differently, and that's not like a on-site surprise kind of a thing. Like, that's a discovery call kind of a conversation. Mm-hmm. And the same with bringing in virtual presenters, regardless of the platform. In the back end, they function a lot the same, but that stuff we need to know ahead of time because of the different way you run the cameras and sound. So
sure.
We've gone past the point where you hand the ATV team a flash drive and say, here's the presentation.
Yeah.
Those days are gone. We need a few weeks to manage the media.
Yeah. And what would you say, so if for those that are participating virtually, in order for them to engage and maybe have their video on, let's say it's on Zoom, because we do ideally want them to be able to interact and engage with, the moderator and the panelists that are physically on site. Could you talk to us a little bit more about like that kind of technical setup?
Yeah, there's a couple ways that can be done. The easiest is really to have so we can either do the classic sort of screen share, for your Zoom platform, or if you send that media to the AV team, and we can blend in the live and then your remote. And so you're seeing those together, or your presenter and your PowerPoint right next to each other. We can seamlessly transition to videos or lower thirds, like the names you're seeing below all of us now. We can put those in. And so it's a lot smoother if you have your AV team do that. And definitely schedule a couple of practices like for queuing and those transitions. How are you going to tell that person on Zoom that they're up next? Mm-hmm. Is that going to be the chat moderator? Are you going to have someone else talking to it? So having a tech call or 2 or 3 to practice those transitions will pay off in spades. In the end, we just recently did a luncheon for a Golden grad group who are 70 plus in age. And they actually had a practice session on YouTube where they all practiced chatting because none of them had ever chatted on YouTube. So, and they were hysterical. They chatted like they write letters. They're like, "Dear Kate, how are you doing? I haven't seen you in a while." It's precious. Aww. So having extra tech rehearsals or queuing, or if you have a remote presenter, checking to make sure that their connections are good, will make everything smoother down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, and Scott, I love what you wrote. So hiring an AV crew to guarantee quality for that evergreen content is crucial for in-person events. Don't skip on the mics, extra cameras, otherwise your content won't be usable. Very, very true. I know that for us as well, just to share with the group, so for the hybrid event that we're currently planning, we are also envisioning recording it from start to finish so that we can then take the video, trim that down, and deliver kind of bite-sized takeaway assets that our clients can use. And for those that physically weren't at the event, either live or virtual, you still have the juice, right, of the panel conversation that you can leverage. So I think we might have 2 or 3 cameras on site. Any thoughts on that, Jennifer, in terms of recording it as well?
Yeah, so if your AV team is using live stream software, we use Wirecast, OBS, vMix, any of those all have record features in them, and they will record exactly how you're sending it out to your audience. So it'll record all that media transitions, all those lower thirds. There are other platforms that do that as well, and you can choose like how the format and stuff that it's being recorded in. And yeah, definitely, it's the same. The virtual and hybrid events are the same as a live event. Bad audio drives people up the wall. Like people will forgive a video not playing, but bad audio just messes with our lizard brains. And so definitely investing in the microphones, making sure everybody can be heard, walking through it. Like, how are you going to do Q&A? Can those people be heard, or does the host need to repeat it? Those little tiny things are going to make a huge difference in whether your virtual audience feels included or not.
Yeah. And on your soundbite thing there, Stephanie, a pro tip that a crew that I used for a long time told me is take down notes on all the golden quotes that happened during it, and even seed a few beforehand to record them, and then afterwards, or typically afterwards, because you can get some magic moments to be recreated. Like reality TV shows, not really reality, they just reenact it. But do the same thing, reenact it right after the event is done, have the crew set up in the back and just walk people through, and then you can get close tied up shots with a good mic right on their lapel, even if they're attendee, and then you get sound bites that you can use to promote your future events and or just on your website, or with if it's like a customer quote for your website or presentations for sales, invaluable assets when you're trying to like, oh, I wish we could recreate that moment again. Well, you can. You have a crew there. Just go record it again.
Yeah, that's great. You can maximize that as well and get a few more videos out of it. I love that. Yeah, just wanted to share, Steve's our CEO. So yeah, in addition to all the amazing points the panel's making, also try to plan for the noise factor in determining your venue and your format. Absolutely. I know that previous to the pandemic, when we were in person, it's different if you can ask the waiters to quietly, place the dishes and clear the tables, and you hear a little bit of the clinking and clanking. But now with way more microphones and cameras and, the audio quality, I mean, we have to be super sensitive to that. So that's actually something that we've discussed in basically having the meal portion after the panel is done. So there's no interference or no risk, right, of crazy noise that you can't control coming into your feed.
One of the things to that point that we ask our clients to do is if they give us an agenda or a script, is we put the AV cues right in that. So we're reading down. And so you can tell them mute audience mics at certain points, how to reduce some of that noise. So if you have Q&A mics, maybe there's an AV cue in the agenda that says, please mute audience mics so that you're not picking up some of that clanking and stuff. And so we actually coach our clients to put those cues right into the script, so that as we're following along, we're seeing exactly what needs to be fired, activated, or muted, depending on what's happening in the room. So the more specific you can be, the better your AV experience is going to be.